We don't want to cancel people out. We want to call people in. We want to bring people together. We want to do the unlearning process. I have lots of unlearning, and I am a woman of color. I am Indigenous. There are some things that I'm trying to unlearn and relearn to be a better ally. But it's all about having these conversations.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 225 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited you are here. If you are a new listener, welcome to the show. I hope you enjoy this episode, and then you can go back to previous episodes. In this episode, I actually mentioned quite a few previous episodes, so you will have lots of starting places to go to after this. If you are a loyal listener, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to introduce you to someone who potentially may be the guest who has the most things that they do, that they are a part of, that they are on boards on than I've ever met. Yes, even more than Alison Desir, who is more busy than I can even put into words. But I think my guest today may actually edge her out by a few more things. I am excited to welcome Jordan Marie Brings Three White Horses Daniel to our show. She is a wonderful person, a teammate of mine, someone who deserves our support and appreciation, and I cannot wait for you to get to know her if you do not already follow her and know her. Jordan is a Native American runner. She is the founder of the Rising Hearts Foundation. There's so many things you could learn about her. I will put lots of links in our show notes, but primarily go to her website and you'll be able to find more about her. You can find that at jordanmariedaniel.com, and you'll be able to just get links to everything. So we are going to go meet Jordan in just a minute. I just want to take a moment to thank Athletic Greens for sponsoring this episode. So thank you, Athletic Greens, for sponsoring this episode. I take it every morning, one scoop straight into a glass of cold water, actually a shaker of cold water, which, by the way, hack for you, I actually do not use the lid. Those of you who have Athletic Greens, I don't use the lid on the shaker, and then I cover my hand, my palm of my hand with as the lid, essentially. Shake it like that. Then you don't have to wash the lid. There's a little hack for you, so you don't have to have one more thing to wash up. Athletic Greens has 75 whole food sourced ingredients. It is the antioxidant equivalent of 12 fruits and vegetables, which is just awesome. You're going to get those hard to find ingredients. You're going to get probiotics. You're going to get prebiotics, antioxidants, this superfood complex that helps your body his nutritional needs across these critical areas of health. It's going to help, especially this year. We need it more than ever. It's going to boost your energy. It's going to improve your mental clarity, will support your immune system, stimulate your digestion, improve your gut health. There are a lot of benefits that you could be getting from Athletic Greens. I love hearing those of you who give it a try, see what I'm talking about, understand why it is such a pivotal part of my life. And not only mine, you heard Rich Roll, he loves it. Michael Gervais loves it. Tim Ferriss said it is the one supplement he would have if he could have any supplement. You're not going to be able to find any other supplement like this. And it is not a pill. It is a scoop. Put in a glass of water, shake it up, drink it first thing in the morning. Done. That is it for the day. It's like an insurance policy for your body, and it's just awesome. I really love my Athletic Greens. And my friends, you as a Running for Real listener can get a 1-year free supply of vitamin D3 and K2 dropper, which I then put straight into the mix I have in the morning. You will get a 1-year free supply when you use the link athleticgreens.com/Tina. That's athleticgreens.com/Tina. And right now they are giving bonus packets of their travel packs just to give you some extra supplies. Maybe you could give them to family and friends. I actually, for a while, was collecting mine up, and then I gave them to the mailman because I knew he was putting himself at risk every day. You can just have them as extras if you are going traveling, or just in case you want to run it, if you are going to run out. It's just an awesome thing to have and a nice thing that they are doing. So you can go to athleticgreens.com/Tina to go find out more and to sign yourself up. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me on the Running for Real podcast today. This feels so long overdue, but I'm excited to have you. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, it's weird to think. So for those listeners, Jordan is teammate of mine, I suppose. We're both ultra running elite on the ultra running elite team. And it's funny, I didn't put the dots together at first when I'd had Rosalie Fish on earlier this year. And when Emily, our contact at Ultra, told me you were coming on the team, I didn't put it together until later, and I thought, oh, that's who Rosalie was talking about. So I will be referring back to that episode a few times in this episode. So listeners, if you've missed that one, after you finish this one, go back to that one with Rosalie, because it was another good one. And she talked about how she admired you so much. It was really sweet the way she did that. So definitely recommend it. Okay. So we are going to dive into your story, your background, just try and get people to understand a little bit more so they can maybe be a bit more thoughtful with the way that they act and the way that they talk. This has been a regular theme of Running for Real, but starting with you, citizen of the, I'm going to try and say this right, Kulwakasa Oyate, which is the Lower Brule Sioux tribe.
Correct. Kulwakasa. The C has like a little like caret above it, so it sounds like CH.
Chasha. Okay, cool. And you lived on a reservation. That's not a reservation?
Lower Brule Indian Reservation is.
Okay, so you live on a reservation now, and you lived on a reservation the first 9 years of your life and moved to Maine. So we've covered what a reservation is in the Rosalie Fish episode, but a lot of people would have never met a Native American, will have no real concept of what that means other than maybe what they saw in textbooks, which they probably are not imagining what is the case in 2020 or even the 1990s when you were growing up on the reservation. So can you maybe break down some of the myths that people might hear and see and think of, and then kind of correct them essentially?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is we are always fighting your own like erasure constantly, because a lot of the textbooks and stereotypes and narratives about us kind of paint us as these like mythical, pre-1900 existing when we're still existing very like present day. But I would say for reservations, there are 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States. And we also have, I think, 66 state recognized tribes. And that goes without saying that we were once thriving in the millions for Indigenous peoples. And so for me, I grew up between my tribe on the reservation and a neighboring town where I went to school in Chamberlain. And that's where my grandfather lived. But all of my family were right on the reservation. And it was sitting on the Missouri River. And it was just having this opportunity at a young age to see kind of life on the res with my family, surrounded by culture, tradition, ceremonies, language, and life in Chamberlain, where, a lot of the kids who did go to school there from the res, we experienced racism. We experienced, ridicule and mocking because our skin was too dark, and just started seeing this difference within the state and in that city of how people view Native people. And so a lot of the stereotypes, are awful, but it's that, like substance abuse users, that we get everything for free. And that's just not the case. It comes down to, we do get free healthcare, and I put that in like air quotes because I want to err on the side of caution of that. We have the Indian Health Service, which is great. We do have access to healthcare, but we don't have access to quality healthcare. And I know that that's something that the administrations have tried to improve at the Indian Health Service, but a lot of IHS facilities that I've been to when I was little, to visiting in communities, a lot of them don't get funding. A lot of them will have lights hanging from the ceiling, or like, just holes in the wall, and just you can see the neglect. You can see the neglect from the federal government in not upholding their federal trust responsibility with these sovereign nations that they've promised to do, especially through treaty rights. And so that is something that is severely lacking for so many reservations and communities, is that they're not receiving the funding and the support that they need, because we're always put on the back burner. We're kind of invisible and forgotten in a lot of cases. And it comes down to emergency type issues like this year with COVID, and how hard Navajo Nation was impacted and still being impacted, and how hard the tribes in South Dakota and North Dakota now are some of the highest infection rates that we have today. And having the funding not be there until way later, and having to have our congressional members like Congresswoman Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids really advocating that we need to include tribes in this relief package, that we were left out of it twice. And so this comes down to invisibility and neglect. And, we have teachers, lawyers, yoga instructors, athletes, advocates, community organizers, and so much more part of our culture and our history and part of our communities today. And so that's, I think, the work that's happening, that we're seeing with more visibility of Indigenous peoples, is that we are showing up. We are showing the world. We are still here. Mm-hmm. And we are going to control our own narrative. We're going to tell our stories our way. And that we're going to try and get rid of these stereotypes and help to inform the communities and the curriculum in ways that truly reflect Indigenous history and education.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And you mentioned there about racism. Now, a lot of people listening would have heard me having conversations with people, primarily Black people, who have experienced racism. We've talked about all kinds of things, but tell us a bit about what does that look like for a Native American? Is it people? Is it lots of little microaggressions? Is it people? Is it just you when you were younger? Is it just kids being kids? Like, tell us a bit about what that looked like for you, particularly growing up.
I think for growing up, it literally came down to ignorance. Mm-hmm. I don't think that a lot of them just didn't know any better, but we also have generational racism that's passed down because you learn it from your family.
Yeah.
You may not know any better, but for me, that looked like, experiencing a lot of prejudice. Now that I'm doing this work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and working on anti-racism efforts, the last few years, I've been learning microaggressions, the name of it, learning prejudice, learning all of these terms that I can now go back into my life when I was younger, all the way through like college, mm-hmm. and pinpoint exact moments and situations where that's what that was. Experiencing racism, racial slurs. We have the R word that, has been said. We have the word savage. While I know some people may not feel bothered by that word, but I know many, especially my nephews, I follow their lead. And when they come home crying from school because kids were calling savages and the R word, I don't take that lightly. And that's not something I want our youth or younger ones to be experiencing in this day. So I have some concerns about that word too. Experienced a hate crime growing up when I was in 8th grade. And basically the cops chalked it up to being kids, even though those 3 kids had a pocket knife that they were waving in front of our faces, chains, and brass knuckles, and threatening to beat us up, and calling my friend who was white, calling him a prairie N-word lover, and calling me the N-word. And that was my first real experience with racism at that age. And I had no idea what those words even meant. And so I'm really shocked that growing up in Maine at that age, that I was shocked that they even knew those words and knew to call me a prairie, because that's only specific to the Dakotas, the Great Plains. So I was really shocked that they even knew that. But it was dealing with a lot of prejudice. I kept wondering why sometimes parents did not like me hanging out with their kids, why they were really protective, and why they kept me from being part of some of these gatherings. But I did experience good too. I had lots of friends. I was that sporty, athletic one. So that was the community that I really felt accepted in, that I never really felt any sort of racism or prejudice.
Was the running community?
Yeah. Because it was about how you showed up at the starting line and how you finished and how you did as a team. But outside of that, it was walking in two different worlds of my indigeneity as a Lakota woman, a Lakota kid, a youth, having these experiences, and then my other world of having to conform, to just not want to be, experiencing these racist comments and situations and these struggles. And especially middle school and high school is already hard enough already, but have to also deal with it because you're questioning your own skin color, you're questioning your heritage and traditions and who you are. And it made me ashamed up until college to be who I was. I hated my brown skin. I hated being different because of how it was made, how society outside of me was making me feel. And having gone back and forth in the summers from Maine to South Dakota, I really saw the racism, especially very present in South Dakota. And just being in the towns that I grew up in and that family, seeing how they treated Native people when they'd walk in the grocery store or the gas station, and just treating us like we're expendable, like we're nothing. And it was just really heartbreaking and really hard to navigate. But it's also what motivated me in 8th grade to want to be an advocate and a voice for my relatives and communities, and to want better, and to, move to DC and be a lobbyist, work on the Hill, pass bills and legislations, and be behind the scenes. And luckily that dream did come true. And I spent 5 years in DC, and that's where a lot of the hard work that I do really kind of rose up from the ground that way. And that's where I founded Rising Hearts and became a community organizer and advocate, where I made sure that I wanted to hold myself more accountable rather than being behind the scenes to make change. I wanted to make sure that I was committing myself to this work and making sure that our next generations don't have to experience this anymore. So now over time, now that we're in 2020 and we're seeing racism and white supremacy clearly visible on every platform, on every screen, and we're seeing the visibility of our Black brothers and sisters so present and so needed, it's incredibly important to me that our movements are intersectional, that not only am I advocating for my own people, but we can't have this change, this transformational change and a better future until we start linking all of our movements and groups and voices, because once we are all visible and all demanding the same thing in strength and numbers, that's when change is going to happen. And so I really care about being intersectional and intentional with other groups and communities and making sure that I can hear them. I can try and support them or help amplify them, even if it's just resharing or whatever it is. But I think that's, part of that work of dismantling, unlearning, relearning, and building a better future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I feel like I don't even need to interview you. You just seem to go into each question without me even asking you about it. So I can clearly tell you've got used to some podcasts, but also it's just the passion within you, the things that matter to you. It does all tie together. And let's focus on that for a minute, the intersectionality of all this. So rather than it just being about, as you said, for your own cause for Native Americans, it's also the BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color community, LGBTQ plus, non-binary. You also, I've seen you mention about two spirits. Maybe you could explain about that. But let's talk about how does that all connect? I mean, I've quite often said that you can't have racial justice without climate. Like, you can't fix climate until we get to racial injustice first. But tell us about how it all connects. All these different things that we're fighting for, all these marginalized groups, how do they all intersect with each other?
So a lot of us, are experiencing, I would say, especially for Indigenous and Black communities, is that, we need to recognize the very foundation and creation of this country, rooted in colonization and imperialistic views and the need for conquest and to be more superior, while, that has really significantly damaged and harmed Indigenous peoples by, the land theft, that we need to acknowledge that everyone here is a guest on these lands, that these lands were stolen from us, that so many nations are unceded. They never gave up their right to give up the lands, but yet they were still taken. And so that's something we need to recognize. And then we also need to recognize that, our Black brothers and sisters were stolen from their homelands, and our island relatives were stolen from their homelands. And they were brought here to build this country, basically, and they were enslaved. And so when we can recognize this true history and not treat it like cafeteria food where we're picking and choosing what we want. We need to acknowledge the very cause. And this is due to colonization. This has led to intergenerational trauma. This has created white supremacy and racism and prejudice, and has created systems of oppression that our communities are suffering from, that we are constantly neglected and treated as expendable. But as I say, we need to be intersectional. I always will say the longest, lengthiest sentence ever is that I want to be visible. I want our groups, our communities to be visible. So I always say Indigenous, Black, Brown, Asian, Muslims, Two-Spirit, LGBTQ, non-binary, people with disabilities, because we have all seriously been impacted by this, and has led to our invisibility or erasure, has led to the racism and systems of oppression, and has continuously marginalized our communities and our people, and has created this trauma that we are still trying to heal and cope with and learn how to be able to move forward in life. And so a lot of people always try to interject of like, well, that's too long of a list, but that is the list. And I'm sure there's more that could be added to it. And until we have a seat at the table, and until we are all on the same equal playing field where our voices are just as important and our opinions and advice is just as important and taken seriously and included in all of these discussions and policies and whatever, then there won't be a need to list off every single community and group. But until then, I'm very passionate about giving visibility to saying it all, even if it's lengthy.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that definitely makes sense. And for a white listener who's listening to this right now, what do you see? I mean, I've asked this quite a lot. What do you see as what can they do? I mean, I hear this all the time from people who know I'm passionate about this too, that like, okay, I've read the books, but now what do I do? So obviously, there's no like check done thing with this situation, but what would be your advice to the listener who maybe has read How to Be an Anti-Racist, has read Why Do All the Black Kids Sit Together in the Cafeteria, or whatever other books that people might be reading, and they're still thinking, okay, now what?
Yeah I am very much about being proactive, and we can't treat it like a checklist, especially like a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts usually do, and tokenize our faces and voices or, advice as part of their building of their programs. But I would say be proactive. It doesn't stop with just that book. It's about having these conversations of anti-racism, anti-Blackness, what is happening in our communities, the white supremacy, the racism, the prejudice, at the conversations at the dinner table. Have them with your children at a very young age. We need to be very mindful when we hear statements of like, well, I don't see color. Well, that's colorism. And that's really harmful and dangerous when we use, certain words like that and phrases like that.
Can I just pause you a second? Just a counter argument that I hear all the time. Okay, when people say, yeah, but my parents are in their 70s, in their 80s. So what's the harm in letting them go? I can't challenge them at this point.
Yeah, well, like I mentioned before, that's part of that generational racism that gets passed down. But there's always opportunities to still challenge. And I think that can start with just the one person who sees that challenge and is willing to take the initiative to try and inform and have these discussions. Try and come from a good place rather than coming from a place of frustration and anger, and try to understand maybe how they got there and maybe phrase it in different special ways. It all comes down to being able to communicate it in a very good way. We don't want to cancel people out. We want to call people in. We want to bring people together. We want to do the unlearning process. I have lots of unlearning, and I am a woman of color. I am Indigenous. There are some things that I'm trying to unlearn and relearn to be a better relative and be a better ally. But it's all about having these conversations. It's all about, if you have resources and connections and the privilege that our communities can benefit from, please share those. Share that with us. Help amplify our voices and messages. Follow the accounts. And if you read things coming from their voices and their platforms, and it makes you kind of feel like, whoa, that's not me, or you feel a little bit triggered, sit with that for a moment. Take 3 deep breaths and ask yourself, why did I have that reaction? Is something that they're talking about actually true and it made me react in a way? Am I guilty of this? Like, start asking yourself and challenging your own self and sitting with those emotions and reactions and being able to better understand them, because we have a lot of learned behavior in us, because of textbooks, because of things we listen to, because of, the propaganda that's out there, and potentially a lot of misinformation and news and all of that. So we're going to be having our own kind of triggers when we experience these things or read these things, but we need to come at it with a good place, a good open heart, and be able to unlearn and relearn. And it comes down to, like I said, following, supporting, donating, amplifying, centering, and just coming into those spaces as, someone who wants to learn. And we can see that when you come into our space or reach out to us and say, how can I help? And you're showing up constantly. It's not just that one good deed you tried to do, and that's that, which I've seen a lot of performative acts, which is something that we deal with. We see it and we recognize it. And it's about building community, at least for me, and at least for Rising Hearts. It's about calling people in and being able to create a better future.
Okay. And then where would you say someone listening who, wants to be brought into the circle, or not the circle, but wants to be brought in, wants to help, but right now has the temptation to go on Instagram, find you, send you a direct message saying, what do I do? Where would you send people instead, as you are stretched so thin with a full-time job, day job, and then all the other advocacy you do? Where would you send them instead?
Yeah, well, I'm more than happy to connect. I don't always want to be the person, the voice, or, doing this work. I always want to uplift my friends and family that are still doing this work. So I'm more than happy to.
Well, you can give me a list if you want, and I can put it in the show notes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to share other resources. They can visit my website, www.jordanmariedaniel.com. I have community tabs of organizations that you should get to know. I have a community tab of just resources, podcasts, books, articles to read, and, just ways for you to be engaged, to be more informed. And you can also do the contact page on that website, which will email me, and you can select a certain kind of checkbox depending on what it is and how you want to communicate with me. That way it's better for me in organizing in my type A inbox. But yeah, I'm also gonna probably connect you with other people that are doing this work, because there are so many of us that are doing the hard work, and, they are doing just as much important work. And so I'm always happy to share other voices and organizations with other people.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned there, you've said it a few times, the hard work. Tell us why you say that instead of doing, I guess it would be the hard work or whatever it is other people say.
Yeah, I'm all about reframing our language and our connection to words that I feel like has lost kind of meaning to it lately. And for example, a lot of the times, instead of saying thank you, I say appreciate you, because that has a more direct personal connection to that person that is offering to do something for you, or has, done whatever, and showing that you appreciate them is one thing, but saying it, I noticed when I've talked with people, they've texted me back or responded to me saying, hey, I'm noticing other people saying, I appreciate you, when they end their email. I saw that you were doing this, and I'm happy to see that it's like other people are doing it. But it made me feel so happy, it made me feel valued. And so it's even changing words and our connection to it, and how we can appreciate each other in this work, because it is a lot of work, and being more mindful of it. And I think it goes a long way. And so for me, when I say heart work, which I've learned from amazing sisters and aunties, I'm a society fellow with the Return to the Heart Foundation for 2020. And a lot of us, I kept hearing everyone just saying heart work. And it's something that I truly resonate with. Rather than calling the work that we do, that we're passionate about, hard, while it may feel like that, calling it the heart work, it's because it's the center of everything that we do, why we do it, why we spread ourselves thin, why we take on too much, why, we are just devoted to our community and to our relatives. So I think it just encapsulates the work that we do in a positive way, reaffirming to us that this is what we're meant to be doing.
Thank you to MetPro for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. Now, you may remember me talking about MetPro in the past, or maybe you remember hearing my episode with Angelo Poli, who is the founder of MetPro. You may also remember that I had little ads with him a little while back where we'd answer your nutrition questions. And I thought that was a really great way. It wasn't necessarily about MetPro, but just a way to learn instead of hearing ads. And I really appreciate this company and what they're doing. Angelo Poli is this body transformation expert and founder of MetPro, which is a concierge nutrition, fitness, and lifestyle coaching company. Now, when I first learned about them, I was a bit skeptical, and I did not hide that fact. I told them that on the phone, but I soon learned that they're not wanting to guess what to do with metabolism. They're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes. These experts at MetPro are there to help you reach any of the goals or the struggles that you might be going through. They've helped thousands of individuals transform their bodies by hacking their metabolism through this concierge coaching. Over the years, MetPro has heard from people that they wish they could experience these benefits of their signature concierge coaching, but it's always been a little too high of a price for many of you to afford. And I know some of you have told me that as well. Now, the team at MetPro listened when they heard people saying that, and they've been working diligently to bring the MetPro algorithm to the palm of your hand. You know where I'm going with this. So today I'm excited to tell you that their newest edition, the MetPro Platform, is an app that allows you to experience the same science, the same tailored strategy that experts use. Now, something particularly special about MetPro is that you, as one of my audience members, have a chance to be one of the first to experience this new platform. And this isn't food logging or a workout app. It allows you to start tracking, analyzing, and learning what your metabolism responds to best. So then moving on in the future, you know how you respond to certain things and you learn to listen to your body. That's the thing I'm always saying is really important. And now MetPro is going to teach you how to do that. So if you sign up using the link metpro.co, that's metpro.co/Tina, you will get 14 days free. So head to metpro.co/Tina to take advantage of this special opportunity.
Calling it the heart work, it's because it's the center of everything that we do, why we do it, why we spread ourselves thin, why we take on too much, why, we are just devoted to our community and to our relatives. So I think it just encapsulates the work that we do in a positive way, reaffirming to us that this is what we're meant to be doing.
I love that so much. And then I feel you could add even one more element. When I've been doing my meditations, when I think about feeling love and appreciation and joy, it feels like it's coming, what they say, the heart center. Like it feels like it's coming from the center of your body, like the core of you. So I actually really love that you say heart work. So that's really cool. I want to dive into your story a bit more, just as you grew up and as you became yourself and kind of things that you're quote unquote known for. So we mentioned about you moving to Maine age 9. And you've said with us that you felt like you didn't fit in. Did that come across as like an urge, like I have to kind of squash down my heritage, the things that I enjoy doing because I want to fit in? Was that a conscious choice for you, or was it just little things that along the way you just pushed aside because you didn't want people to view you differently?
So at first when I went to Maine, I treated it as I was going to be in my own community because I hadn't experienced racism and didn't realize the outside world of what it was like. I stayed being me, but until I started experiencing those situations, it made me not, I guess, forget who I am, but it made me, keep silent to who I am, and the ceremonies and the traditions and my family and where I come from, made it so that I just kept it to myself and only kept it, talking about it with my parents. They tried to raise me as traditional as possible, even while living away from my family in South Dakota. But, it got to be a struggle because of the things that I was experiencing. I just wanted to be normal and to be accepted. And like I said, no one wants to, high school and middle school are already hard enough already, but that's just what I wanted. But because of these situations, it made me feel ashamed. It made me not like my brown skin and my hair. And, it made me not appreciate who I was and who I was born to be. And that didn't change until college, until I was in Maine. I went to school, D1 college, doing track, cross country, indoor, outdoor. My parents were back in South Dakota. And so they kind of like left me, and I was kind of struggling with my identity as a runner, a student, a Lakota woman. Like, how can I merge all of these together for me to feel confident, for me to feel safe and secure and proud? And it wasn't until I started taking all of the Native American studies courses and had Native professors, and they really made it feel like family and home in every single class. And it came down in sophomore year where one of the teachers was like, hey, you should go down the road to Penobscot Indian Nation. They're having a community powwow. And that's what I was missing the drums and the singing and just relatives. And this is something I always say in our communities, especially with our grandmas and aunties, and we all gather together, there's that certain like Native laugh that you hear from them. And it's just always reminds me of home. It makes me feel safe and comfortable. And so I took his advice. I went to the tribe. I brought one of my track mates with me. She was really supportive of who I am and my traditions and everything. And so we went to the powwow, and we just sat there and we did a community round dance. We got to enjoy Indian tacos. We got to watch some basket weavers, and just being part of the culture, even though it wasn't mine. But some of the things were so similar in terms of how they interacted with each other, how close they were. The music, the drums made me feel more confident in who I am. Because I was kind of at that turning point of like so conflicted, just didn't know how to sit with it. And if it wasn't for his advice, I honestly don't know if I'd be where I am today. Because
that was a defining moment of like, all right, that's it. This is like, you saw it clearly.
Yeah, it was. I am Jordan. I'm Jordan Marie Bringsthrough versus Daniel. I am a fourth generation runner. I am proud to be who I am. These are Indigenous peoples. This is our culture. This is, we've survived and we are still here. And just that experience made me feel more assured in who I'm meant to be and what I'm supposed to be doing. And it just kept that focus even more on, I need to be an advocate. I need to make DC happen. I need to not be worried about anyone else. I need to feel proud and be proud of who I am and my skin and how I live my life and the ceremonies that I've been part of and everything, my Lakota name, everything. So yeah, it was that moment that made it all clear for me. And then starting from then, while being a full-time student and athlete, I volunteered at that tribe for like 4 years, either working employed or volunteering in their daycare center, their HR, their cultural preservation center, the Boys and Girls Club. And they really helped make college, more manageable and more fun, and just more safe and more community driven for me.
That's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. And just smiling, listening to you, because you can sense how much that moment meant to you. And how do you think things would have differed then had you not moved to Maine? Had you stayed on the reservation? Do you think you would have ever lost that identity? Have you thought about that?
I honestly don't know. I don't think I would have lost the identity because I would have been surrounded by my family. And I don't know. I would still like to think I'd go to college. I probably would have gone to the University of South Dakota, which is where my grandfather went and ran track. But I don't know. I'd like to think that I would still be doing this work. Maybe, I don't know, maybe not to the extent that I'm doing it, but would still be rooted in trying to give back to the community.
Yeah. The what ifs are always a dangerous path to think about because so many things, change life's direction we go in. But yeah, just interesting to think about that you almost needed that moment to finalize who you are. And make it so that you could have it in whatever life threw at you. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so back going into running, you've mentioned fourth generation runner. Your grandfather, Niall, is that, how do you say it? Niall? Okay. Was a long distance runner for the University of South Dakota, inducted into the School Hall of Fame, which is really, really cool. Your mum was a sprinter training for the 1988 Olympics. Did you feel any kind of pressure to be a runner? Was it almost like a calling to being a runner? I mean, you've talked about not enjoying it at first, but tell us about the internal feelings that you had towards the sport before you realized you enjoyed it.
So running was always what my grandfather did, and he was known as the runner in the tribe and in the community. So it was always cool having that superhero be known for that and watching him go out on his runs and stuff. So I was really excited when he asked me to go on a run with him when I was 10. And that was my first experience. And he lives at the top of a hill. We ran down and then we had to turn around and come back up. And that was like, why is running fun? Like, I'm running up a hill. This is hard. But it was something that connected me to my grandfather and my mom. It was this opportunity to have shared similar conversations and talk about running, talk about the stats, talk about the splits. So like from a very early age, I've learned the language of talking about splits and like getting it down, different pace work, all because of him. But I didn't feel that calling to it that I felt like they did. So I felt no pressure coming from them. It was only the internal pressure that I was creating for myself, feeling like I had to be a runner. Mm-hmm. So they encouraged me to try other sports, and I did. Tried everything possible and just wasn't coordinated enough. And every time, I was always known as the runner within every sport that like, I was a good runner. I had good form or I had good endurance, that you should try cross country or you should try track. So that eventually started happening in elementary school and just started doing the summer track events. And I liked it. It was competitive. It was something that I could share in conversation with my family. But I didn't like absolutely love it until college. And it was something that I knew that I was good at, something I could keep conversations going. But it wasn't until college where I had an amazing coach, Coach Mark Leck, who had a great philosophy, who really took the time to understand and know each of his runners and treated us individually for the whole. And he didn't treat us as the team, the whole, and that was that. So a lot of the workouts were always, revamped in case, one of us was struggling, and then he would pick, something else that would play to our advantage, because definitely my specialties were mile repeats. 800s or 200s or something were not my specialty. And so he would find other ways to still get the benefits of it, but still do some of the workouts together as a team. But he always catered to each and every one of us, to our abilities and to our strengths, and worked on our weaknesses. And it was him that also got me to confront my eating disorder problem and secret that I kept for 2.5 years, and got me to confront it and admit to it and speak to it publicly, and tell my parents, tell my partner at the time in college, and focused a couple months on trying to get help and working with a nutritionist and gaining weight. And finally, running no longer felt like it was a strain for energy. I wasn't exhausting myself super fast, and I all of a sudden felt this wealth of energy coming, and running just started getting better. All of a sudden times were dropping dramatically, and I just felt so strong and so confident, and started reshaping my connections to food, reframing how I look at it. And just was always being more mindful, and more intentional with making sure that I was snacking, brought snacks in my backpacks to class, and just had this understanding of how important fuel is, even though it's an obvious, but when you're struggling with that issue and that sickness, it's something you neglect entirely. And so running changed. Running finally felt more free and felt more me. And I just loved how it made me feel and felt stronger, and was having a better relationship with how I looked at my body. And that's when I started running a lot more on the trails rather than running on the roads and the same routes that my teammates would always do. I just started running on the trails more, and just had this connection to the surroundings and to the landscape and to the soils and everything, and had this much deeper appreciation for running. And that's when I fell in love with it. And that's when I finally felt like I had attained what my grandfather and my great grandfather and my mother felt for running.
I love that. Did you ever talk to your mum about feeling that way when she was younger, because of her dad being, I'm assuming your grandfather is her dad, right? Because of him being such a good runner, did she ever feel like, what is this? I don't know if I belong there, like if this is my calling?
Yeah, I mean, she loved track and basketball, but she wanted to do it because he did it. And so he was coaching her literally from the moment she started walking,
Oh, wow.
Through high school. And so then I think it transitioned to wanting to do it because that's what he did and that's what he was expecting. And so she put a lot of pressure on herself and really struggled with running towards the latter part of high school. And then she got pregnant with me. So I kind of ruined that opportunity and all that training for the 88 Olympic trials for her. So right now for me, it's a goal of mine to make it to the Olympic trials and the marathon because 2 Bring Through It Horses family members have tried and life situations happened that prevented them from having that dream come true. And I feel like someone's got to make it there. And I'd love for that to be me. If not, I hope maybe my future kids one day will be runners and they can do it. But yeah, it's part of that dream.
I love that. And then back to the eating disorder, just briefly, do you think any of that was, usually an eating disorder is associated with some kind of insecurity or mental issue that's going on. And having been through it, I can also attest to that. Do you think it was anything to do with that identity going on underneath?
So in high school, my senior year, it just started out with, I want to lose like 2 pounds just to like a little bit faster. And I still ate. I just changed the way I was eating and what I was eating and eliminated a lot of stuff. But I was still eating my meals and I did lose the weight and I did see those benefits of dropping in my times for the mile and the 2 mile. But at the same time, I was in a toxic relationship and he started saying comments about my body. And then that's when the insecurities came from it. And that's when it just kind of spiraled out of control and it just got worse from there.
As it always does, unfortunately. And for anyone who is struggling through that, I have plenty of episodes you can find if you want to hear about how to work through that, if that is something you're going through. I also have another one coming out on December 25th, so stay tuned for that one. Okay, so taking on to the next step part of your journey, you've said you've discovered this love of running, appreciated it, all that it was about. Tell us about being approached by Billy Mills ahead of 2016 Boston Marathon and what that moment meant to you.
Yeah, so Billy and my grandfather Niall, they were competitors and they were friends growing up, 2 different tribes. And something that I found out from Billy when my grandfather Niall passed away, he mentioned that my grandfather beat him. And I'm like, Billy's been like never beaten, especially by another native. And I was really shocked to hear this. I thought Billy was just joking because Billy was the pallbearer for my grandfather. And so we were kind of sitting at the table and he was sharing all of these stories that he had with my mom and I. And we were just like, my grandfather totally would have rubbed that like in our faces and like would have definitely spoke to that. But I think it just speaks to his humility. And that was just a little win that he kept to himself. But Billy said that he beat him in the mile. And just hearing that was amazing. And so I've known Billy, Lala Billy, grandfather, as he will call me, his adoptive granddaughter once my grandfather passed away. I've known him and Pat for, I think, 6 years now. And when I moved to DC, I reached out to Running Strong for American Indian Youth and was like, hey, I want to volunteer. I want to help support. Let me know. And so for the Marine Corps marathons, they were organizing these Team Running Strong events for them, having the runners come to DC. And so I just helped out with their programming, helped stuff bags, helped cheer on the runners, made signs, did whatever. And so we just kept this relationship and just kept in touch. And then in 2016, he invited me to be on the team to help fundraise for the organization. And so that was my first experience with Boston. And sadly, at that time, I was really injured within like the month training to it. And I was really disappointed and felt all the pressure. And so I probably shouldn't have run it, but I did. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. And it just has created this incredible, family relationship between our 2 families. And he's really been there for us. He showed up for my grandfather's memorial a year later after we buried him. And everything that I do is rooted in community. So I've done a couple other fundraising efforts to help support them and work really closely with Lauren and Uchi Pat. So yeah, they're just that other family to us, and they've just been so good to us.
Mm-hmm. And And was it his idea to do something in, I think it was April 2019, would have been Boston 2019, that you really changed the way that you were approaching what you wanted to do on behalf of your ancestors, on behalf of your relatives? And tell the listeners, I mean, we had Rosalie talk about it earlier this year, but tell us about that decision for you and why actually you were the one that she learned about this from. So tell us a bit more about your decision there.
Yeah, so my connection to running has always been because of my family. It's tradition. It's, part of us. It transformed to Native representation as an athlete to hopefully help pave a path for new Native athletes coming in. Mm-hmm. And then it became, as it intersection of sport and advocacy, it transformed into that to what I'm doing now today. And so 2019 Boston Marathon came a month and a half before it. My friend Dustin Martin of the Wings of America executive director, he asked me to run for them, to help fundraise and to run in the marathon and just be a chaperone to the youth. And so I said yes. I jumped at it. Hadn't trained for it at all. Only was training for the half marathon, which was happening exactly a month from the marathon. And I figured that'll get me to the finish line, hopefully. And so I was excited to go. And during this time, I'm sitting with these thoughts of how can I give more visibility to this epidemic and international crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. And 2 years in a row at that half marathon, the San Diego half marathon, I dedicated my bib number to MMIWG or MMIW, hoping it would spark conversations. And it did with just a couple people, but it didn't have the impact because it was still only being talked about within Indigenous circles and Indigenous conversations. And it felt like no one really cared that 5,712 women went missing in 2016. And having relatives murdered and taken from our family and knowing someone who knows someone who's lost a loved one, we are very directly or indirectly connected to this issue. And so when the Boston Marathon came, I wanted to think of ways of how I could honor them and remember them and to send prayers and be intentional and purposeful with my running. And I didn't want to do something that would take away from the youth because this is their time to shine. They were doing a college visit with Harvard. They were juniors, so they were starting to plan their future. And they ran the BAA 5K. It was incredible to cheer for them. But I was just like, what can I do that won't overshine them? Because that's the last thing I'd want to do. And it just got down to the point where I was just frustrated with the lack of visibility. And I was just like, I can't keep organizing about this and sharing or donating or retweeting. That's not working. We're not giving the support to the families and the advocates and the organizations that's needed. So the only thing I know how to do is running. And I'm just going to offer prayers because I have been part of prayer runs before. I have been part of prayer vigils. But I've never done it in a competitive platform in such a big arena like the Boston Marathon. And so I was just like, I'm going to paint this movement and paint, this epidemic and issue on my body. And that's when I asked my parents to get me the red hand paint and to bring it to Boston. My partner is driving me to the starting line and I'm just starting to paint the letters on my leg and my arm. And he helped me with the red handprint. And the red handprint symbolizes the violence that is silencing, our voices and our relatives' voices taken too soon. And I've seen it in rallies. I've seen other relatives wear it. But I figured that this is the best way for me to honor them. And I had 26 names and I wanted to offer prayers for them, offer prayers for their families, their communities, and then spend the remaining mile just enjoying the course and the atmosphere that Boston Marathon brings to us. And so it happened 26 times in a row. And then the last point too is for my grandfather, who the 2016 one, he was there to cheer me on, text me and call me. So it was a little sad being back there and not having, those pep talks with him. And so that was my way to honor him and remember him. But, I honestly had no idea that it was going to have the impact that it did because I kind of lost hope in people caring about Native people. And I wanted to do something for them and for the community. And with one post a couple days later, listing their names and listing the facts and calling attention to it, it went viral and it just had an incredible impact that I never, ever saw coming.
All right, friends, it is time for our Black-owned business of the week, except today we are not going to be doing Black-owned and Black-owned business. In fact, moving forward, we are not going to be doing only Black-owned businesses. It is going to be BIPOC businesses. It is going to be all kinds of marginalized groups that Jordan and I are talking about today. I will be focusing on today. I want to speak specifically about Indigenous voices and support Jordan herself. She doesn't know I'm doing this, but I want to support Rising Hearts, which is this Indigenous-led grassroots group which is devoted to elevating Indigenous voices and promoting intersectional collaborative efforts across all movements in this fight for racial, social, climate, and economic justice. So Rising Hearts is committed to dismantling white supremacy and racism, all while elevating Indigenous, Black, Brown, Asian, Muslim, immigrant, Two-Spirits, LGBTQ+, non-binary people, and people with disabilities voices. As she said, that is a lot of different people to include, but it is much needed. So I really want you to go check this out. You can find it on her website, as she talked about that. You can also donate. They have a list of projects that they're working on. You can support them. You can email them. You can learn more about the things that Jordan is talking about today, including the 2020 project, The Missing. And there is some artwork there. You can get access to their Instagram account. Just a really wonderful place to go learn from and to just support Jordan for all that she is doing. There is so much that she is doing, and this is a great way you can go support her. She is doing all this by herself, getting this going, and has a great community of people that she is supported by in this Rising Hearts coalition. So go to jordanmariedaniel.com to learn more. You can also find them on Instagram by searching for Rising Hearts. And yeah, go check it out. Thanks very much.
I wanted to do something for them and for the community. And with one post a couple days later, listing their names and listing the facts and calling attention to it, it went viral, and it just had an incredible impact that I never, ever saw coming.
Do you know how that kicked off? Was it someone that followed you that saw it, who was for a publication? Do you know how it happened?
I have no idea. It just all of a sudden I put my phone away because I was still sitting with that emotion and decompressing how heavy it was. And I just made the post, put my phone away, and then I checked it a few hours later, and my phone was just buzzing, message requests, thousands of likes and comments and reshares and retweets. And then I just started reading the messages and seeing some, of the families that I had run for, reaching out saying thank you so much. Or next time if you do this run again, can you run for my relative? Or just getting a lot of very uplifting responses. People, I guess, that were sitting on the same bus as me when I was going to the Hopkinton start line, saying they saw me and they wish that they had known about this, that they wish they could have shaken my hand or, wished me luck or something, because it just led to amazing opportunities to give visibility to their voices, their stories, their families, and this issue. And yeah, it's just been an incredible journey. It's been overwhelming. It's been really, emotionally hard and heavy, because with running now, when I bring it into the competitive platform, I'm having to come into these races already mentally exhausted from doing the research, from finding the names, from trying to get permission from some of the families, and reading about the stats, reading about their story, and literally some of the details of what happened and why they're no longer with us. So having to sit with that before a race really, really wore me out by the end of 2019, and led to a lot of, led to depression, led to insomnia, led to anxiety attacks and panic attacks and nightmares and lack of eating, because I just lost all interest in anything if it wasn't running, if it wasn't creating content to share about this or organizing about this. And it made me disconnect from friends, from not wanting to be around anybody. I literally just wanted to either be in bed or be running. And it was really hard. And now that we're in 2020, I'm finding ways to deal with it and cope with it in better, healthier ways, working with my Indigenous therapist, which makes all the difference in the world, having someone who looks like me and understands these issues, from a first perspective, makes such a big difference. And so it's a growing process. Healing's not linear. So I'm still working on trying to find ways to how can I still be impactful, purposeful, respectful, and intentional, while also being able to practice self-care and take care of myself after these runs. And so I'm still learning. And
you just did a 30-mile prayer run a few days ago. Tell us about why you did that and how that went.
Yeah, I wanted to do the Truth Giving prayer run, not only for the 30 days, the 30 miles that are in the full month of November, Native American Alaska Native Heritage Month, but I also wanted to offer prayers for relatives taken by COVID this year, as COVID's really hit Indigenous communities pretty badly, as well as, our relatives taken by this violence and police brutality, and also give prayers to our Mashpee Wampanoag relatives who are literally the story of why Thanksgiving even exists, this colonial holiday exists, and that the fact that they're in like a 2 or 3 year struggle fighting the administration to keep their sovereignty, to keep their land, to keep their culture, because 2 years ago, I believe that the Trump administration took away their sovereignty and didn't recognize them as a sovereign nation anymore and tried to steal their acres, their lands. And so they're still in this battle fighting for representation and their sovereignty. And so I wanted people to think about this day in a new way. I wanted them to think about it in a new perspective of what this day represents. And I know a lot of our Mashpee Wampanoag relatives call this day a national day of mourning, because of what's happened after and ever since, and that this holiday is really romanticized, and treated as in a way of celebration when it's not a celebration. It's the lives lost and taken ever since, and a lot of the injustices and fights that we're still doing today. And so I wanted this prayer run to uplift them and for people to know about this issue because it is present right now. And to also run in solidarity with Seeding Sovereignty, who I partnered with to organize the Truth Giving 4-miler. And it was just an opportunity to, one, bring community because people showed up to cheer me on, or they showed up to run some of the miles with me, and to see and learn how you can be intentional and purposeful with your running, and how we can use it as a platform to share these messages, to share these stories, and to, build community.
Mm-hmm. And how have you seen the running community in general change this year in particular? I mean, we've seen the Runners Alliance Ambassador Network, which you're a part of, founded by Caroline Zhu, and we have seen people talking about things more, but would you say the running community has done a good job? I mean, obviously we have a way to go, but how are things here?
We're seeing change happen. It's just whether, for me, I'm always cautiously optimistic. I look at consistency and I look at sustainability of these actions and these gestures. And so I think it's great. A lot of change is happening. A lot of organizations, running communities are looking at their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in programming, their hiring policies, and they're working and collaborating, consulting with Black, Brown, Indigenous people's disabilities, everywhere you name it, to try and be better. But my thing is, I want to see the same effort and passion and care for change a year from now, 2 years from now. I want it to be just as important, just as impactful, and hopefully see more and more people joining these movements, joining these fights and efforts to support our voices and the things that are happening in our community, especially when we talk about runner safety, especially for women of color. We deal with catcalling. We've dealt with sexual assault. We've had runners murdered. We've had runners taken and disappeared. We've had, runners, just deal with a whole bunch of, issues on their run when we should be able to enjoy it and not have to worry about these things. So I think change is happening. It's slow moving. But cautiously optimistic. Hopefully it stays the way it is.
Thank you. And then just to finish off here, I mentioned about Ultra at the beginning. Ultra, you are now a sponsored athlete for the Ultra Elite team. Tell us about how that feels for a brand to be taking a step like that, not just with you, but as a whole. I mean, I hope they don't mind me saying this, but they sent out an email a few days before the week off Thanksgiving saying Ultra was going to be quiet, not going to mention Thanksgiving or Black Friday or any of this as respect for the Native American community and for Native American Heritage Month. Tell us about that. Like, how's that feel having a big brand coming behind you in this way?
I think it's incredible, and it's the exact kind of things that I want to be seeing, even not just for Native communities and athletes. I want to see it for everybody. And they've been so supportive this whole time, even before, the sponsorship became official. For the 360 mile per hour run I did in September from Bears Years to Salt Lake with SLC Air Protectors. It was 11 of us running and doing relay legs, and they donated shoes for everybody. And it was a simple ask. I wasn't expecting anything. I was hopeful that they would at least maybe even donate a couple, but they went all in to support all of the runners. And just having the opportunity to write blogs, to share about that experience, to give visibility is just so meaningful to me. And it's about representation. And I hope that with this sponsorship and this collaboration, is paving the way for other Native athletes and youth athletes to see themselves in these spaces and platforms. And, it's been an honor to be on the cover of Trail Runner magazine and Runner's World, magazines, especially Runner's World, that I wished I saw someone like me. I wished I saw my grandfather on it, or Lala Billy, or Alvina Begay. Like, I just wish I saw someone that looked like me. And I'm so honored that I could be that girl. I could be that runner to do it. And I just hope it just starts paving the way for more representation, more diversity, and more support for our communities.
I am sure it has. And listeners, if you want to hear more about that, actually, Aaron and Joshua Potts talked a lot about this concept in their episode about seeing people that look like you. And then again, we talked about it with Daryl Murphy. So be sure to check that out if this is something that you are just learning about for the first time. Jordan, anything else you want to say to the community about what you would like them to do moving forward, or ways you've given a lot of ideas here, but anything else while you have the floor? Anything else you'd like to say?
Yeah, so I'm organizing a bunch of stuff with Rising Hearts. Right now, we are in month 3 of Indigenous Wellness Through Movement, because health and wellness is so important to me. And I know that's something I need to be better about. And especially since we are in a pandemic, I want everyone to be able to have the opportunity to practice self-care and to even take a break from running and try something new and see how it can benefit you potentially. So this series is mostly going to be led by Indigenous wellness advocates and instructors. But as I've mentioned before, and very passionate about, is being intersectional and collaborative with other people. So this month we have some special guests from other communities that are going to be sharing their medicine and their practices. And this is free. It's open to all. It's donation based if you're able to. Every session, all the information is provided about that voice and their practice and their Venmo or their PayPal options if you're able to give. And this is going to be every month. And starting January 2021, we have a new collaboration happening with the Yellow Project, which they develop wellness packages, self-care packages that you can purchase off of their website. But we're going to be collaborating and using one of their self-care packages and indigenizing some of the items and supplementing them with indigenous made products like lotions or lip balms or bath salts or moisturizers. We're really excited. Probably going to have Tonka bar treats.
You might have to say what that is. Or maybe other people know what that is, but I don't know. What's you said Tonka bar?
Tonka bar treats are made from bison, and they have like choke cherries in it or oranges, and it's like jerky, but I think it tastes so much better. So yeah, it's Tonka Bar. Look them up, the Tonka Fund. They're absolutely incredible, and they're run out of South Dakota. And I used to be an ambassador for them. So that's going to be available for purchase to have, and to just have some of that self-care within their home. And then we have the Running on Native Land initiative that's going to be launching in January 2021, which is going to have some diversity, equity, and inclusion focused efforts, but it's bringing land acknowledgements into the running spaces, making sure and working with hopefully race directors, event directors to bring land acknowledgements into those platforms and to hopefully be able to work with them, and having portions of the proceeds or the registration fees be donated to local Indigenous Native communities or programs that are nearby where that race is happening, inviting the local Native community to either give the land acknowledgement or to at least be able to participate in that event for free, being able to give back to the community, while also reframing how we connect with the lands in our surroundings and acknowledging the Indigenous names, place names, and Indigenous lands for what they are and how they were cared for with Indigenous stewardship, and kind of removing that element of privilege. And I guess kind of that, it sounds harsh, but like kind of that self-entitlement when we go out for that run, that privilege that's there, but eliminate that and just reframe it as we get to connect with the lands. It's a blessing to be here. It's a blessing to run on the trails or the roads and to be in this atmosphere, and just reframing it all. And so I'm really excited for that to happen. It's going to have a downloadable toolkit for people to use and reference. And hopefully that leads to consulting and being able to work with event directors about this. And then we're going to be launching the Running with Purpose community virtual team, which it's going to start out with a small cohort of maybe 25 runners. And it's basically creating a community that allows us to support each other, but also allow us to find ways of how we can give visibility to the issues that we are passionate about, that we care about, that we want to give visibility to. And it's going to have singlets. I'm going to be partnering with my new apparel sponsor. They've committed to making singlets and a whole race kit for anyone that wants to be part of it. We're going to have standing monthly calls to hear about what we're doing in our communities. How can we show up for each other? How can we support this one runner who, is passionate about something, but they don't know how to bring it into their platform or how to take those steps on organizing for it or speaking to it. So it's going to be building community that way. And that also supplements our film project, Running with Purpose, where we're going to be hopefully telling the stories of so many different runners who have purpose to their running and why they do it.
Jordan, you are such a special person and a big, beautiful heart that lives within you. I do not understand how you have the energy, the time, and the heart to do all that you do. I just cannot say thank you enough. I appreciate you enough on behalf of our community. Thank you for all that you do. Just hearing that sounds like a full-time job in itself. So you are amazing. So we'll put links in the show notes. We've already said about your website. People definitely should go check out things, check out resources. Don't go DMing her with the questions that you could get answers to on her website. Go there first and then reach out if you have something specific. Any other places you want to send people?
Just the Instagrams. You can either follow me at _native in LA or at rising_hearts.
Okay. All right. Jordan Marie, bring us 3 white horses, Daniel. I appreciate you. I'm so thankful for you. And thank you for joining me today.
Appreciate you. Lila Palame. Thank you so much.
Before we end this episode, I just want to take a moment to shout out my podcast editor, Jeremy Nessel, who has done such a wonderful job of looking after my podcast, taking out all the mishaps in the episodes, while still keeping in the vulnerability and the realness and the rawness of the conversation. This is not one of those podcasts where I take out the ums and the ers and the sometimes the delay in words, because I think it's very important to keep that authenticity. We're surrounded by perfected and manicured everything, and I think it's really important that Running for Real stays that way. So thank you to Jeremy for your work. I also want to thank Maria Vargas and Amber Moore, who are also part of my team. They've been a big part of this community and me being able to build this brand. So just want to give them a shout out too. All right, let's get right back to the end of this episode. So appreciative of her for explaining all that to us, and just what a wonderful person. Really thankful for Jordan. And I learned a lot in that episode. I mean, I'm sure you did too. And it was just great to learn from her. So she actually allowed me to rekindle, that's not really the right term, but to reach out to a friend who I had on my college team who I hadn't spoken to in many years. And it was just really great to talk to him. And I don't think I would have taken that nudge. So David, if you happen to be listening, I'm excited that this episode with Jordan was the nudge I needed to reach out and get back in touch. You can find links to everything we talked about today in the show notes by going to tinamuir.com/episode 225. You can also get that special deal from Athletic Greens where you get a 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 extra packets of Athletic Greens powder with your purchase. That's 5 travel packs, not the big packs. By going to athleticgreens.com/Tina. I also would like to thank MetPro. You can get a 14-day free trial of their MetPro platform by going to metpro.co/Tina. That's metpro.co/Tina. And we'll have lots of links in the show notes for things Jordan recommends to go check out, and then also some accounts that she recommends you should follow. So be sure to go check out those show notes today, tinamuir.com/episode 225. My friends, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.